Excellent. Okay, so what I'd like to do is I want to just go ahead and give a little additional information about homework one. So the course of 2120, I have broken down into 4 different units. Unit 1 is effectively API programming and software engineering principles that support API programming. And API programming is effectively building software that's designed to be used by other developers to build out their applications, not to build applications in and of themselves. So homework 1 is supposed to be the homework that really focuses in on developing your own API. And so I selected an RPG item system. So after talking with some of you and looking at some of your code, I'd like to just go ahead and stress this kind of feedback and advice to you. So the API that you're going to build, make sure that whatever the concrete objects are have some kind of purpose, that they do some type of thing inside of your system, inside of your item system, and that you can illustrate what the behaviors are that are happening to your items using the JUnit test. So the JUnit test is how you can test your individual classes and methods without having to create main methods to go ahead and build things out. In fact, it's a better way than main methods because it allows for a user to quickly run the test and see that all the tests pass and give names to all the tests and be able to show what each test is doing in isolation. So it's just an easier way to give working code to another developer so they can utilize your system. So building on top of that, I want everyone to experience not only being the implementer of an API system, but also being the client code to that. So I'm going to give you a view into the future as to how this code is going to be used. So the next unit we're going to cover is going to be the collections API. And in the collections API, I'm likely going to author a homework 2, which is it's going to be a homework other number. It could be 2, it could be 3. It depends. It will be some future homework where you will build an inventory system or some kind of interaction system that uses items. Probably the easiest thing is going to be an inventory system, but I'll probably leave it open to your own design on what it is your application does with the items. But this is going to be the big caveat. The item API that you will use will not be of your own. So what you're designing now will not be what you use in homework 2. It will be another student's API, which is why it should be important that it actually does something so that another student can come behind you and actually use it for implementation purposes. So this will give you the ability to have to use someone else's code, and where you can play the role as an implementer and you can play the role as a client. Now, now you might wonder, how are you going to get that API? Well, there's one of 2 ways, and I'm not sold on either. Well, I'm leaning towards one. I can either randomly assign them, or what I'm leaning towards is allowing you to look at all the APIs that were submitted, and you get to self-select which one you want to build your application around. That will be like an inventory system, but it cannot be your own. You cannot select your own system. So you have to select someone else's system, so that you have to use the Javadocs. You have to read through their API. You have to use the JUnit test to see how it works so that you can start building software around it. And you can build an application around it. Now, I'll also make this offer. I like the idea of students being able to shop around and select their own API. So I'll extend out anyone's API who is actually used in another student's project will get bonus points for that. So, and it would be cumulative. So if 5 students decided to use your API for going ahead and building out their application, you would get 5 times the bonus points. So that to give you a rationale as to why you should invest into building out a good items API, it's because we will use it in a future assignment, and you will use someone else's, and you will get bonus points for producing one that's coveted or used by other students. But that also comes with an additional caveat that you become responsible for servicing those students' requests or for any information on how to use it. So it starts establishing that client implementer role of having to fulfill the preconditions and postconditions. So is there any questions related to what my idea for that is? Or does everyone feel comfortable? Now, with that said, and now that I'm giving you this information, we haven't really covered anything new for me to assign a second homework related to API programming. So what I think I'm going to do is I'm going to extend our due date for your API programming assignment by a week. So I'll make it due not this Friday, but next Friday. And that should give you plenty of time to continually develop your JUnit test, your Javadocs, and to make sure that you have a solid set of principles of how your item system can be used. Because again, there will be an advantage if you build something that's good and strong and useful if other students decide to utilize it. Okay, so does anyone have questions related to that? Excellent. Well, if there's no questions, I will go ahead and let you all go. Have a great weekend, and I will see you all. Yeah.
Oh, yeah, I got one question. So all yesterday I was trying to see how to submit the homework. I know I messaged you on Discord, but the second part I'm still kind of confused how to do it. Could you show me an example?
For being able to submit onto onto GitLab or GitHub?
No, the HTML file on your
yeah. Okay, let me do that really quick. So I had a question. Yeah, so when you use the Javadocs tool, and I showed how to use Javadocs, and I'm going to load up over here. Let me close this project really quick. When I showed you how to use Javadocs inside of IntelliJ, let's go to our Javadocs demo. Is it this? I forget. Let's see here. I think this is it. Hopefully this is it. So here, when I created my Javadocs example, I want you to see that I had my source code, and we just did something simple, if you remember. You can go back and watch that video if you don't remember, but we created just an interface called iMath that had parameters and return and at requires and at ensures. And here at that time I was highlighting that these aren't real. Those aren't really Javadoc annotations. The return and the params are, and that's what effectively lets other client codes know what your preconditions and postconditions are, right? Because this is what our function returns, and this is what it requires as a set of parameters. So when I went to tools and then generate Javadoc, it gives me the options of where to put the Javadocs. You should put it in a docs folder because it's going to generate a whole lot of code. And so when I was talking about HTML code, look at this, the index.html. This is all of the API documentation that's auto-generated using the Javadoc comments. And so this should be inside of your project file. So if this is your item system inside of the SRC file, right, inside the SRC package, then you should also have a docs folder that's going to have all of the Javadocs that's generated so that this could be viewable. And so what's great about this is if I go to index.html and if I say, hey, open this up so I can get a preview of it here, even I could either open it in a browser or I can even use IntelliJ to give me a preview. Here I can say, oh, here's my interface. I can click on iMath. This is the iMath HTML here. So I'm going to click on there. It's then going to give me public interface iMath. These are all the methods. It's got square root. Square root has parameters, x and epsilon. It returns back the approximate square root value. So again, this is the API. This is my contract between my client and myself on how to use this method. And since you need to create Javadocs, since other students will be using your item API, you need to give your documentation alongside so they can open it up in a browser and very easily see what is all of what's the interfaces, abstract classes, the classes that you have inside of your package, and then also like how is each of the methods used inside of each of those classes. Does that help? Does that help explain what I'm looking for? Excellent. Is there any other questions related to the homework while we're talking about it? Because all the homework related stuff I'll keep adding as project stuff on the YouTube playlist. Okay, well, if there's no other questions about it, then I will go ahead and I will end our lecture today. I'll see everyone next week. This should be, in my opinion, the last of the lectures related to Unit 1. So I'll likely author up some kind of concepts like material that you should have gotten from this unit, and we'll pick up on Monday, moving to Unit 2, which will be the collections API. Excellent. So here.